They took it away from us just to give it back even better, apparently. They're calling the new Gibson Les Paul Studio the One. Seems a little cheesy to me, but at least they're actually having some sort of a marketing theme towards bringing them back. Welcome back, Troglodytes, to your daily dose of guitar information, the Trogly's Guitar Show. We're not just going to review the new guitar, we need to learn about the history of the studio model. So let's go ahead and dive into that so we can understand why this new series is kind of cool in the grand scheme of things. The Les Paul Studio was first formally introduced in the year 1983. They looked like this. The first 2 years actually featured all their bodies, believe it or not. They had the cool Tim Shaw PAFs, but there were 3 versions: the regular Studio, the Studio Standard, which featured binding on the body and the neck, as well as the Studio Custom, which is the same as the Studio Standard, it just got the multiply binding on the body. But the golden era for studios was the early 90s, when they featured ebony fretboards. And then around the mid-90s, they switch them back into the rosewood, and they stay fairly similar until the Henry J era, where they start to mess around with different weight relievings and finish styles. However, the next biggest change actually occurred for the 2018 model year. Out of nowhere, Gibson was like, what if we put binding on the Studio, but just the fretboard? So it's kind of one of those, interesting idea. When you're buying on the used market, that's what I would tell people. Look for a 2018 if you want a little bit more flash. Go for one of the original Studio Standards or Studio Customs. Those are phenomenal guitars. Or my number one recommendation would always be a 90s Studio. So, in a roundabout way, we have seen a reissue of the 2018 Studio. But you gotta remember, they changed up a whole bunch of other stuff, and I haven't had one of those in my hand personally. And if you still like the idea of the ebony fretboard, you can check out the modern Studio, which just came out a couple of months ago. That features an ebony fretboard with black binding. So 2024 was definitely the year of revamping our Studio. However, this has the ultra modern weight relief to it, so that's the one that has the V cut. I've got to say, this thing is exceptionally light. Like nearly bordering on the line of being too light, but yet still within that acceptable territory. That is the first thing I notice. And the neck actually feels a little bit wider than usual. I think it's because of this whole slim tapered neck profile. We'll definitely get all those detailed measurements on the workbench. But besides just adding binding, what is different between the one that they just discontinued is the fact that we finally strayed from the tried and true ever since the 90s 490R, 498T set. We actually have burst buckers in this baby. More specifically, the Pro model. And yes, you do still retain the coil splitting features. But how much does our new Studio cost? Surprisingly, it's actually cheaper. They're $1,599. Now that's how much the Studio's been for quite some time. However, towards the end of their life, they actually did creep up to $1,699. And they're offering them in 4 different finishes. You got a traditional cherry sunburst, a wine red that's been growing on me, a straight up jet black ebony, then the most exotic color offered, blueberry burst. Which I thought this particular example looked kind of nice, because you got to remember, these are low grade maple tops. However, that doesn't mean you won't find an occasional flamey one. Now, I wouldn't necessarily call this a flame top by any means, but it's got some chatoyant movement to it. It's not a completely plain piece of maple, and you got this kind of interesting thunderbolt area up here by your toggle switch. But at that price, besides just your guitar, you get the standard Gibson gig bag. Although, it's not a hard shell case, but these can be nice to run around if you're just going to practice or something. But for historical preservation, here is a box tag for this one. Also comes with a pre-pack checklist. This model does not come with the Gibson multi-tool, but you do get kind of a basic strap with a polishing cloth, an Allen key for use with your bridge, a basic truss rod tool, and a cream poker chip. Okay, I think somebody put the wrong pack in this, because that should definitely have a black one. Historically, I've never really been a big proponent of a brand new Studio, simply because there's so many great used deals. But, you know, I think they're trying to counteract that by having the binding, because they have very few previous Studios to compete with that. So if that's a feature you like, so far this actually does feel like a really nice guitar. And I like that we have at least one exotic finish. I would like to see more. And what really could have put this model super over the top, even if it was $100 more, is if they would have gave us a natural edge binding. You can kind of see what I'm talking about right here. You see the maple top, how it's a light blue? If they would just scrape that away to reveal that and give us a faux binding effect, I think these would have been even more popular. But so far, just right out of the case, I actually am impressed on a brand new Studio, which says a lot for me. But let's go ahead and throw this on the workbench, verify all the parts and specs, and then we'll sit down and do a little bit of playing. Let's see what we can learn. Starting with our neck pickup, it is indeed a burst bucker, labeled as the Rhythm Pro, whereas the bridge is labeled the Lead BB Pro to help you identify it as a burst bucker. I just want to drive the point home. The fact that they changed the pickups in the Les Paul Studio is a huge deal. Personally, I like the 490R, 498T, but I know there's a lot of guys in the camp that are like, no, not my favorites. So maybe this will appeal to them. But you can see these have the 4-conductor wiring for obvious reasons. I am curious if we're going to find a quick connect in there or not. But here's our neck pickup cavity labeled for Blueberry Burst B9 with a star. And then our model identification code LPSP for Les Paul ST Studio, and then 01. And then we've got our 2-piece maple top joining onto our weight-relieved mahogany body. As far as the routes go, there's a few areas they could have cleaned up. But as far as smoothness, it's honestly not too bad. But it looks like they do not stain right there by the neck. That's so strange to feel that it has a clear coat over it. I just really hope one day they'll actually try that natural edge, because PRS does it all the time to great effect. And like on those modern studios, you can take a razor blade and do it yourself if you really wanted to, but this one being such a gloss finish, you're gonna have to use more extreme chemicals than that. I would not suggest that to an amateur. But your bridge reads 8.18 k ohms, neck position 775, and then our middle together 3.98. But don't forget about our coil splits. Alright, yep, that tells me everything I need to know. We're probably still running a PCB if it doesn't change the readings within the circuit. Sometimes they're like that, but we'll see. It could also just be my guitar's defective, but I doubt it. But our stock knob is the black bonnet. I'd say it's a good choice. It's pretty easy to grab onto and pull up. It doesn't have a lipped ridge or anything, but since there is a slight carving to it, it's not hard to grab. And that is a push-pull pot, not a push-push. But now, bridge and tailpiece time. These are all lightweight, API branded. And it's Nashville in style. We already talked about how you can adjust your thumb wheels with the Allen key, or you can use them with your thumbs. What a novel idea. And it's a lightweight tailpiece by API. Now we can take a second just to appreciate the top in a different lighting situation. I'm not going to say any of the colors really do it for me. I would love to see something a little bit more exotic, similar to the Gibson Victory that just came out, a nice green burst. Something to give it a little bit more flavor and drive you over the edge, just in case the binding wasn't enough. But if Gibson has taught us anything in the past, they're going to introduce a couple of colors, see how well they sell, and then if it's a top product, they'll introduce more colors. I mean, look at the Les Paul Standard. I think we have, what, close to 50 colors now? But you do still have a pretty decent top carve, and this is a full gloss finish. That's a difference between this and the modern Les Paul Studio. And it does come with a black pick guard already installed upon it. Got a felt pad there to stop the screw from scratching. However, hasn't done it yet, but usually those will slightly react to the nitro. Actually, you can kind of see it right there. One of those situations where Gibson just cannot win. So what I'm saying is, if you really like the look of this without a pick guard, take it off as soon as humanly possible, because it's really not that noticeable unless you're trying to get it in the light and you're looking for it and know that it's there. But we can move on from our mahogany body maple top to our mahogany neck with rosewood fretboard. I went ahead and conditioned the fretboard. It's just a regular 22 medium jumbo style frets, acrylic trapezoid inlays, just like a Les Paul Standard, 12-inch fretboard radius, 24 3/4-inch scale. I thought this neck was wide, 1.72-inch nut width, 210 by the 12th, whereas your first fret neck depth is relatively skinny at 0.81, and whoa! 0.91. They're not joking around when they call this thing a slim taper neck profile. Personally, I think this is going to be the make it or break it spec. Here's that neck profile on the contour gauge, 1st fret and 12th fret. It looks deceivingly rounded, but trust me, this has that really wide feeling neck. You can kind of see it over here on the 12th, but it technically is still C-shaped. If you do not like slim necks that feel wide, you're not going to like this guitar at all. Don't even bother. However, if that's what you do like, definitely give it a try. I would love to see a 50s rounded neck version of this come out, but I can understand why they don't, because it gets kind of confusing having 100 different million models. Because that's what was great about early 2019. You could see the entire lineup. It was easy to understand. The prices were fresh in your head. You had set colors to everything, but after a couple of years it all got stale, and it feels like we might be over diversifying, where the lineup has started to become confusing, even for the guy who actively tracks these as a job. But now we can move on to our headstock. You will notice it's just a regular Gibson silkscreen up here. So they go all fancy on your binding, but skimp out on that, which I was kind of sad about, because the modern Studio with the satin finish does get the mother of pearl logo. Had this retained that, that would have been really cool. But you just have a truss rod cover that reads Studio. There was no blank one in our bag, at least not on this particular one. And here you can see the truss rod itself and through to your bare mahogany that creates the neck. But now we can move on to the back. I was trying to decide between the blueberry and the wine red because I just thought the wine looked really good on this new model, but this blueberry won me over because it's got this interesting like scratching design on the back of the wood grain. Now unfortunately this is a really dark finish. You don't get to appreciate it that much, but you can kind of see it here in the video. I'm always looking for, something additional and cool to see within my review series. But our output jack is black on the edge, and you've got the large style strap buttons in your usual locations. So there you go, read it and weep. It is still a PCB system. So if you go to Gibson's website, you can still see they've got the original and modern collection. But if you click on the modern collection, it's kind of confusing because we've got the regular Les Paul Studio in the modern collection and the modern Studio in the modern collection. I think this would have been a good time to make these hand wired. And yeah, we would probably end up losing the coil splitting feature, but then we could have considered bumping these into the original collection, which I get. That's usually reserved for the 50s and 60s models, and this one's technically early 80s. However, I think it would cut down on some of the confusion that, the first time Gibson buyer might be experiencing right now. But hey, you know what's great about a PCB? Quick connect system. You don't like these pickups? Just gently pull them out. Put whatever quick connect pickup in there that you do want, because again, go to Gibson's website, they actually sell them now. So you don't have to fear paying Guitar Center $150 just to change your pickups. You can do it yourself. Easier for Gibson warranty replacement if your output jack goes bad or something too. That's also quick connect, as is your toggle switch. And speaking of that, here's what that cavity looks like, with just our regular black back plates in both positions. Studios are slightly thinner guitars, whereas a regular Les Paul's about 2 inches. I measure 1.86 here, whereas in the middle of the body it's about 2 1/4, when it's normally about 2 1/2. So slightly thinner body reduces the weight, on top of the weight relieving. If you have a bad back, I can see why this one might win you over as compared to some of the other Studios. Now let's face it, not everybody wants to lug around a 9-pound guitar. If I were to guess, this is probably around 8. But let's move on to the neck real quick before we get that. Unfortunately, there is a pretty big flaw on this one. There's some contamination in the finish or uneven sanding. Do you see it on the neck right there? On a brand new guitar, that's a little bit embarrassing. Those were not dings caused by me. You got 2 of them there, which is a real shame because as far as like the small tooling marks on the fretboard and the binding, this example was actually really good, but a little bit of a finish contamination or something on the back. Even the nut was good on this one without too much finish seepage. Now, does it affect playability in the slightest? No, but it will make this a much better price on my website, so you can feel free to check it out, troglysguitarshow.com, after the review. Now we can move up the backside of the headstock. Gibson Deluxe Kluson style tuners. Serial number dates it to the 222nd day of 2024. Initial batch number 252. Still made in USA. But now the moment of truth. Let's see it together. Wow, just a little under 7.5 pounds. I was too scared to guess too light because then it's going to seem like a boat anchor. But yeah, I told you that's a very good weight. If it was any lighter than this, it would start to feel like a toy. So far so good. Let's go ahead, plug it in, and hear how it sounds. So those were our pickups, stock from the factory, not messing with the knobs or anything. I've got to say the neck position is definitely my favorite. nice and warm, pairs well with the bridge in that middle position. But the bridge on the clean channel, it just doesn't quite have enough humbucker in my opinion. It's just a little bit brighter, so that could be a good or a bad thing. That's up to you. But I think with some distortion, that's really going to come to life. Yeah, the bridge is alright with a little bit of dirt on it. It's got a really nice aggressiveness to it without being muddy or too over the top. But the neck still holds its own. From the opinion of the guy who's tried a lot of Les Paul Studios in his day, can I honestly say this is the one for everyone? It's the great reimagining of the studio. It's fantastic. Everybody needs to buy one. No. However, it is a very good guitar. I think you should highly consider it if you like the slimmer neck profile. That's pretty much the only thing I can tear this one apart on is not everybody's going to like the slim tapered neck. If you like a more rounded neck profile, you are not going to enjoy this guitar in the slightest. However, what it does have going for it is how lightweight it is. I could see why somebody who's a gigging musician would want to take this out, but yet they want just a little bit more blingage on the neck. And I can't really compare it to a 2018 Studio because unfortunately I never did get around to reviewing one of those. I thought the stock pickups, they're not as harsh as the 490R 498T set, so that could be a good or a bad thing. But uh-oh, I just realized I forgot about the coil splits. What a blunder. So here's our neck pickup. better. Now we know what this thing can actually do. So, clean channel, again, I think everything's good here. Neck pickup really stands out. I do enjoy the coil splits on that, because I thought this kind of had a slightly brighter tone to it, but when you actually coil split it, it really does move you into slightly P90-ish territory. However, distorted coil splits, I didn't think it sounded that particularly fantastic, but hey, maybe if you can noodle around on it a little bit more, adjust your amp settings, you might have better results. So overall, would I suggest this if you like a slim neck profile? Yes, I can honestly see why these things exist in the market. Because if you're at like Sweetwater or Guitar Center, you take one of these off the shelf or Les Paul Standard, even if budget isn't a concern to you, I could see how some people might take this one home just because they like how much lighter in weight it is. And since it's got a little bit more fancy ornamentation to it, you're not losing as much and you're saving some money if you don't care about the body's binding. So what would I pick between a 90s Studio and this brand new one? If you're not weight sensitive, I would still probably go to the 90s because I like the unbound neck. I don't think binding adds too much outside of just a little bit of additional blingage. However, just to drive the point home again, these are lightweight and they are looking good. So if that sounds good to you, you might check one of these out. Otherwise, there's plenty of other models out there. So all right, troglodytes, I hope you found this video to be helpful. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll catch you tomorrow on the next one. Take care.